The monitor flatlined, and the final sound I heard wasn't my husband's voice, but the crisp click of his leather shoes walking out the door to meet another woman. Death was supposed to be my tragic end. But when my eyes snapped open, the calendar stared back, offering a chilling gift. 365 days before my murder. Rain lashed against the towering Gothic windows of the Prescott estate in Connecticut, matching the absolute desolation in my chest. If you had asked anyone in our elite social circle, my marriage to Nathaniel Prescott was the merger of the decade. The Hayes and the Prescotts, old money shaking hands with new tech. A fairy tale draped in designer silk and ungodly amounts of wealth. But behind the wrought iron gates of our manicured property, my life was a beautifully orchestrated prison. Nathaniel never loved me. He made that excruciatingly clear on our wedding night. Standing by the window of our bridal suite in Aspen, not even looking at me, he had poured a glass of scotch and delivered the terms of my life sentence. Let's not pretend this is anything but a transaction, Madeline. You get the financial backing your father's company desperately needs, and my board of directors gets the stability of a married CEO. Do not expect romance. My heart belongs to someone else. That someone else was Vivienne Dupont. She was a French-American gallery owner, an heiress with a penchant for playing the tragic victim of circumstances. Nathaniel's mother, Evelyn, had forbidden their union because Vivienne's family lacked the unblemished scandals the Prescotts required. So, I was chosen. The perfect, agreeable, docile Madeline. For 3 years, I played the part. I smiled for the cameras at charity galas, I hosted Evelyn's suffocating garden parties, and I turned a blind eye every time Nathaniel's late nights at the office smelled faintly of Vivienne's signature jasmine perfume. I thought my devotion would eventually wear him down. I thought if I was just good enough, quiet enough, supportive enough, he would see me. But then, the sickness began. It started as a dull ache in my joints, then progressed to a crippling fatigue that left me bedridden in the east wing of the manor. My hair began to thin. My skin turned a sallow, translucent gray. Nathaniel's personal physician, Dr. Alistair Reed, dismissed it as severe anemia and chronic stress. He prescribed iron pills and bed rest. I was dying, rotting from the inside out, and my husband couldn't be bothered to notice. The night my heart finally gave out, I was gasping for air, clutching the silk bed sheets in absolute agony. Nathaniel stood in the doorway, dressed in a bespoke charcoal tuxedo. He was checking his phone. "Nathaniel," I wheezed, reaching a trembling, bruised hand toward him. "Please, call an ambulance. I can't breathe." He finally looked up, his expression a mask of mild annoyance rather than panic. Alistair said, "You're prone to panic attacks, Madeline. I cannot do this tonight. Vivienne is hosting the winter exhibition, and the press is expecting me. Drink some water. I'll have the housekeeper check on you in the morning." He turned around. The door clicked shut. The physical pain was horrific, but the shattering of my soul was what truly killed me. As darkness encroached, bringing a terrifying cold that started in my fingertips and rushed to my heart, I realized the absolute foolishness of my life. I had traded my youth, my dignity, and ultimately my life for a man who viewed me as a minor inconvenience. I took my last rattling breath, alone in the dark. And then I gasped. My lungs expanded aggressively, sucking in sweet, crisp air. I shot up in bed, my hands clawing at my chest. There was no pain, no weakness. My skin was flushed and warm. I scrambled out of the king-size bed, my bare feet hitting the heated hardwood floor, and sprinted to the vanity mirror. The face staring back at me wasn't the hollowed-out, dying woman from the East Wing. My cheeks were full, my eyes were bright, and my thick blonde hair cascaded over my shoulders. Trembling violently, I snatched my phone from the nightstand. October 14th. It was exactly 1 year before my death. Our second wedding anniversary. I collapsed onto the plush rug, pressing my forehead against the cool wood, and laughed. The laughter turned into deep, racking sobs, and then into something entirely different. A terrifying, icy calm washed over me. The universe, in its infinite twisted wisdom, had hit the rewind button. I wasn't just given a second chance at life. I was given a front row seat to my own murder investigation. And this time, I wasn't going to be the victim. I walked into the massive walk-in closet and bypassed the soft, pastel dresses I usually wore to please Evelyn and Nathaniel. I pulled out a sharp, tailored crimson suit. As I applied my lipstick, staring into my own reflection, I made a silent vow. Nathaniel Prescott married me out of obligation, treating my life as collateral damage. Now, I was going to make sure he buried his regret right next to the ashes of his empire. The first rule of survival is recognizing your predators. In my past life, I thought my enemy was a weak immune system and a loveless marriage. Now, armed with the harrowing memory of my demise, I knew the truth was far more sinister. I hadn't just died of natural causes. The symptoms, the hair loss, the nerve pain, the sudden organ failure, they pointed to something deliberate. By 9 a.m., I was sitting in a sterile, private clinic in downtown Manhattan, far away from the Prescott family payroll. Doctor Alistair Reed, Nathaniel's lapdog, was the last person I would ever trust again. Instead, I paid cash to see an independent toxicologist. "I need a full heavy metals panel," I told the doctor, my voice devoid of emotion. "Arsenic, thallium, lead, whatever you can test for. Expedite it." While waiting for the results, I had to play my part. I returned to the manor just as the caterers were arriving for our anniversary dinner. In my previous life, I had spent this entire day in the kitchen with the private chef, desperately trying to recreate Nathaniel's favorite childhood dish to win a crumb of his affection. When he finally came home, hours late and smelling of jasmine, he had glanced at the spread, told me he had already eaten, and walked upstairs. I had cried myself to sleep. Not today. I dismissed the caterers with a generous severance for the day. When Nathaniel walked through the front door at 8:30 p.m., the grand dining room was completely dark. He found me in the study, sitting behind his massive mahogany desk, sipping a glass of his most expensive vintage scotch. He stopped in the doorway, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Madeline, what are you doing in here? Where is the dinner?" "I canceled it," I said smoothly, taking another sip. The burn of the alcohol grounded me. "You're late. I assumed you had a more pressing exhibition to attend to." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "It's our anniversary. You're supposed to be." "Waiting by the door like a loyal golden retriever?" I interrupted, standing up. I smoothed out the crimson fabric of my suit and walked slowly toward him. The sheer shock in his eyes was intoxicating. He was used to the apologetic, soft-spoken Madeline. The woman standing before him was a ghost seeking vengeance. "I realized something today, Nate. We've been pretending for 2 years. Let's stop. I don't care where you were tonight, and I don't care where you go tomorrow. But understand this. I am a haze. I am the reason your stock hasn't plummeted. So from now on, you will treat me with the basic professional respect my name demands, or I walk and taking my father's capital with me." I didn't wait for his response. I walked past him, leaving him completely stunned in the hallway. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a triumphant drumbeat. The next morning, the clinic called. The results were in. Trace amounts of thallium. It was a tasteless, odorless, highly toxic heavy metal. Because it was so early in the timeline, the levels were low, but they were there. It was building up in my system. Someone in this house was actively, meticulously poisoning me. I locked myself in the master bathroom, running the shower to drown out any noise, and leaned against the marble tiles. Who? Nathaniel was cold, yes, but he was a coward when it came to getting his hands dirty. Vivienne didn't have access to the estate. That left the staff, or my blood ran cold. Evelyn. Every afternoon, without fail, my dear mother-in-law, Evelyn Prescott, insisted we share a pot of her specialty blended herbal tea imported from Sri Lanka. She poured it herself. She claimed it was a Prescott family tradition to bond the women of the household. In my previous life, I drank it dutifully, desperate for her approval. I needed proof, and I needed leverage. I covertly reached out to a man named Dominic Harper. Dominic was a shark of a corporate lawyer, the kind of man who ate predatory billionaires for breakfast and kept their NDAs as trophies. Through him, I hired Leo Rossi, an off-the-books private investigator whose moral compass pointed exclusively toward cold, hard cash. I need you to shadow two people, I told Leo over a burner phone from the back of a tinted SUV, Nathaniel Prescott and Vivienne DuPont. I want photos, bank records, encrypted messages. I want to know what they eat for breakfast and what offshore accounts they use to hide their affairs. And I need a background check on Evelyn Prescott's recent financial movements. The game had fundamentally changed. I went back to the manor and played the part of the compliant wife, though with a new, icy detachment that left Nathaniel visibly uneasy. When 3 p.m. rolled around, I sat in the sunroom across from Evelyn. She smiled her tight, aristocratic smile and poured the dark, fragrant tea from a silver pot. "Drink up, darling," she purred, sliding the porcelain teacup toward me. "You've been looking a bit pale lately. This will put the color right back into your cheeks." I picked up the cup, letting the steam warm my face, and looked directly into the eyes of my murderer. I smiled back. "Thank you, Evelyn," I said, bringing the rim to my lips. I faked a sip, letting the liquid pool in my cheek before covertly spitting it back into my napkin when she turned to call the maid. "You have no idea how much I appreciate your hospitality." I bagged the damp napkin the moment I was alone. The evidence was sent straight to Leo. A week later, Leo delivered a manila envelope that held enough explosive material to level the entire Prescott legacy. Sitting in Dominic's fortified office, I spread the documents across the glass table. Not only was Evelyn buying thallium through a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands, but Nathaniel's beloved Vivienne wasn't just a romantic mistress. She and Evelyn were working together. They were quietly siphoning millions out of Nathaniel's private trust to fund Vivienne's failing art galleries, preparing for the day I tragically passed away so Vivienne could swoop in, play the grieving savior, and marry into the family, completely under Evelyn's control. Nathaniel didn't even know his mother was stealing from him, nor did he know she was plotting my murder to facilitate his happily ever after. He was just a pathetic, arrogant pawn in a chessboard run by the women he thought he controlled. "What's the play here, Madeline?" Dominic asked, leaning back in his leather chair, a dangerous smirk playing on his lips. "We take this to the police, Evelyn goes to prison for attempted murder, and Nathaniel gets a PR scandal." "No," I said softly, gathering the papers. "Prison is too easy. If I go to the police now, they get lawyers, they spin the narrative, they survive. They took everything from me. My health, my dignity, my life. I don't just want them behind bars." I looked up at Dominic, the coldness of the grave still lingering in my eyes. "I want them to destroy each other, and I'm going to provide the matches." Vengeance requires a chilling amount of patience. If I had simply gone to the authorities the moment I discovered the thallium, Evelyn would have hired a team of high-priced crisis managers to brush it under the rug. She would have claimed it was a misunderstanding, an accidental mix-up by a senile housekeeper, or perhaps even framed me as a hysterical, suicidal wife trying to ruin the family name. The Prescotts had spent generations perfecting the art of burying their sins beneath mountains of cash. To truly destroy them, I had to dismantle their foundation of trust from the inside out. I had to make them eat each other. My first objective was Evelyn. The psychological warfare began at exactly 3 o'clock every afternoon. The tea ritual remained uninterrupted, but the execution shifted entirely. I purchased a highly absorbent, medical-grade sponge, cut it down, and concealed it within a silk handkerchief I kept tucked in my sleeve. When Evelyn poured the lethal Sri Lankan brew, I would raise the porcelain cup to my lips, feign a sip, and subtly empty the contents into the handkerchief while dabbing my mouth. Instead of deteriorating as she anticipated, I began to flourish. I fired Dr. Alistair Reed, citing a desire for a holistic approach, and hired a private nutritionist. My skin regained its luminous flush. I began joining Nathaniel for his morning tennis matches at the country club, my energy boundless and my forehand ruthless. Evelyn's carefully constructed composure began to crack. I watched the masked confusion in her icy blue eyes curdle into visible, twitchy panic. She couldn't understand why the heavy metals weren't taking hold. By the third week of November, Leo Rossi's lab results confirmed my suspicions. Desperate and frustrated, she had tripled the dosage in my cup. She was practically handing me the rope to hang her with. Meanwhile, Nathaniel needed his own customized rude awakening. Men like him, arrogant, entitled, and blindly confident in their own supreme intelligence, do not believe what they are told. They only believe what they uncover themselves. I needed him to discover the financial rot festering in his own house. Through Dominic Harper, I enlisted a forensic accountant named Beatrice Caldwell. Beatrice was a ghost in the financial sector, a woman who could trace a single stolen dollar through a labyrinth of shell corporations. She accidentally flagged an anomaly in the joint Prescott-Hayes holding accounts, packaging the damning evidence into a sleek leather binder. On a Tuesday evening, knowing Nathaniel would be home late from a meeting with Vivian, I left the binder open on his mahogany desk in the study. I arranged the pages to prominently display a massive, unauthorized wire transfer of $3 million moving from his private executive trust into a Cayman Islands account, which then funneled directly into Galerie Dupont Vivienne's failing enterprise. I was sitting by the fireplace in the drawing room, reading a first edition copy of The Count of Monte Cristo, when I heard the heavy thud of his footsteps storming down the hallway. Nathaniel burst into the room, his bespoke Brioni suit jacket discarded, his tie loosened. His face was a thundercloud of rage and confusion, the leather binder clutched in his fist. "Madeline," he barked, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "What the hell is this? What are these transfers?" I slowly lowered my book, maintaining an expression of mild aristocratic boredom. "Oh, that. Beatrice from accounting sent it over. I assumed you had authorized it, Nate. Isn't that what your private trust is for? Funding Vivian's Parisian exhibitions?" His jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might shatter. "I never authorized a $3 million transfer to Vivian. And what is this Cayman Holding Company? E.P. Holdings? E.P.? I tilted my head, feigning innocence. "Evelyn Prescott, perhaps? Your mother does handle the discretionary funds when you're distracted." The blood drained from his face. The realization hit him with the force of a freight train. His beloved, tragic mistress and his devoted, overbearing mother were bypassing him entirely, treating his wealth like an open vault. "They wouldn't," he muttered, sounding less like a formidable CEO and more like a lost boy. "I'm sure it's just a clerical error," I said smoothly, turning back to my book. "Though, if I were you, I'd look closer. If they are bold enough to move $3 million under your nose, imagine what else you've missed." That single drop of poison was all it took. Nathaniel's ego was his most vital organ, and it had just been punctured. Over the next 2 weeks, the atmosphere in the manor grew suffocatingly toxic. Nathaniel hired his own auditors. He began locking his office. He stopped taking Vivian's calls, citing board meetings. To accelerate the collapse, Leo Rossi delivered the final, devastating blow against Vivian. Vivian wasn't just embezzling. She was also deeply engaged in a passionate affair with Laurent Fournier, a prominent art appraiser from Sotheby's. They were using Nathaniel's stolen money to furnish a penthouse in Tribeca. Leo managed to secure a flash drive containing months of their explicit text messages, along with high-definition photographs of them leaving a boutique hotel in Soho, intertwined and laughing. I didn't hand the drive to Nathaniel. That would be too obvious. Instead, I had Leo arrange for the package to be delivered via a specialized courier directly to Nathaniel's table at Le Bernardin, right in the middle of a high-stakes lunch meeting with his investors. When Nathaniel returned home that evening, he looked like a man who had stared directly into the abyss. His tie was gone, his hair was disheveled, and the sharp scent of premium scotch preceded him by several feet. He didn't speak to me. He walked straight to the liquor cabinet, poured a glass, and hurled it against the stone fireplace. The baccarat crystal shattered into 1,000 pieces. His perfect, meticulously curated world was unraveling, and I hadn't even lifted a finger to push him. I just let the monsters he nurtured tear him apart. December arrived, blanketing the Connecticut estate in pristine, blinding snow. It was time for the annual Prescott Winter Charity Gala. In my past life, this was the night I gasped my final breaths alone in the dark, while Nathaniel smiled for the cameras. Tonight, the cameras would capture a very different kind of tragedy. The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was dripping in opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over the sea of silk, diamonds, and tailored tuxedos. The elite of New York and Connecticut milled about, sipping vintage Dom Perignon and exchanging hollow pleasantries. I wore a backless, sweeping gown of midnight blue velvet, a vintage Cartier diamond choker resting heavily against my collarbone. I looked powerful, untouchable. Nathaniel was a hollow shell of his former self. He stood by the ice sculpture, heavily medicated on paranoia and whiskey, glaring daggers at his mother across the room. Vivienne had dared to show up, draped in a scandalous red dress, desperately trying to catch Nathaniel's eye. He actively ignored her, the photos of her and Laurent burning a hole in his memory. At 10 p.m., I signaled Dominic Harper, who was standing discreetly by the brass doors of the ballroom. It was time. I glided across the marble floor, approaching Evelyn. She was holding court with several senators' wives, looking regal in emerald silk. When she saw me, her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before returning to its usual, practiced warmth. "Madeline, darling," Evelyn cooed, holding out a crystal flute of champagne. "You look absolutely ravishing tonight. Come, drink with me, to family." I looked at the glass. I knew, with absolute certainty, that she had laced it. It was her final, desperate move. She thought a sudden, tragic collapse at the gala would cement my death as a terrible medical emergency in the eyes of high society. "I think I've had enough of your special brews, Evelyn," I said, my voice loud enough to slice through the ambient chatter of her circle. The senators' wives paused, their champagne glasses frozen in midair. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "I don't know what you mean, dear." "I mean the thallium, Evelyn," I stated, the word dropping like a lead weight in the center of the room. "The heavy metals you've been funneling through E.P. Holdings to slowly murder me over afternoon tea." The silence that rippled outward was absolute and deafening. The string quartet in the corner faltered and stopped playing. Nathaniel, hearing the commotion, shoved his way through the crowd, his eyes wild. "Madeline, what are you doing?" Nathaniel hissed, grabbing my arm. "You're making a scene." I ripped my arm out of his grasp. "I'm surviving, Nathaniel. Something you and your mother made incredibly difficult." I turned to Dominic, who stepped forward and handed me a sleek, black tablet. I tapped the screen. The audio file Leo had intercepted from Vivienne's bugged gallery office began to play over the portable PA system Dominic had seamlessly linked into. Evelyn's aristocratic voice filled the ballroom, dripping with malice. "Just be patient, Vivienne. The Hayes girl is fading faster than Dr. Reed anticipated. Once her heart gives out, Nathaniel inherits the Hayes capital, and you can step in to console him. Just keep siphoning the trust so we have liquid assets ready for the gallery expansion." Vivienne's voice followed, breathless and eager. "And Laurent? Does Nathaniel suspect anything about Laurent?" "My son is a fool who only sees what he wants to see," Evelyn scoffed on the recording. "He is too arrogant to look closely at you, and too blind to look closely at me." The collective gasp from the room sucked all the oxygen from the air. Vivienne, standing near the dessert table, let out a pathetic, strangled cry and dropped her clutch. Nathaniel looked like he had been physically gutted. He stared at his mother, the woman who controlled his life, and the mistress he had sacrificed his marriage for. The illusion shattered completely, leaving nothing but ugly, jagged reality. "Mom?" Nathaniel whispered, his voice cracking. "You were trying to kill her? You've been stealing from me?" Before Evelyn could stammer out a lie, the heavy brass doors of the ballroom swung open. 3 uniformed NYPD detectives, accompanied by Dominic Harper, strode into the room. Evelyn Prescott, the lead detective announced, his voice devoid of any respect for her wealth. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and grand larceny. Vivian DuPont, you are also under arrest for grand larceny and fraud. As the officers moved in, snapping the cold steel handcuffs onto Evelyn's wrists, the grand matriarch of the Prescott family finally lost her composure. She shrieked, struggling against the officers, her emerald silk tearing as she was paraded in front of her peers, her reputation permanently incinerated. Vivian collapsed to her knees, sobbing hysterically as they pulled her away. The ballroom erupted into chaos. The flash of smartphone cameras illuminated the room as the elite society documented the absolute destruction of the Prescott legacy. Nathaniel fell to his knees amid the panic, his hands clutching his head. He looked up at me, his eyes brimming with tears, his arrogance entirely stripped away. He saw me, truly saw me for the first time. He saw the woman who had quietly held his empire together, the woman he had carelessly discarded, and the brilliant, ruthless force of nature that had just outsmarted them all. Madeline, he choked out, reaching a trembling hand toward the hem of my dress. Madeline, I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know about the poison. Please, don't leave me. You're the only real thing I have left. I need you. I'm so sorry. I looked down at the pathetic, broken man I had once died for. The anger was gone. The sorrow was gone. There was nothing left but absolute, chilling apathy. I know you didn't know, Nathaniel, I said softly, stepping back so his fingers brushed empty air. Because you never cared enough to notice. You married me out of obligation. Consider this my resignation. I turned my back on him. Dominic, I called out over the noise of the crowd. File the divorce papers and the corporate dissolution in the morning. Pull all of the Hayes capital from the Prescott Group. With pleasure, Miss Hayes, Dominic replied, a predatory grin on his face. I walked out of the Plaza Hotel, the crisp December air filling my lungs. I was alive. I was free. And Nathaniel Prescott was left entirely alone, kneeling in the ashes of his ruined life, forced to bury his regret while I walked into my future. Sometimes the universe breaks you just to show you how strong your edges truly are. I didn't just survive my second chance at life, I claimed it, stripping the power from those who thought I was merely a pawn in their twisted games. Today, the Prescott name is synonymous with scandal, and I am the sole CEO of a thriving Hayes enterprise. Did Madeline's revenge satisfy that craving for justice, or do you think Nathaniel deserved an even harsher punishment? If this story gave you chills, you won't want to miss our next deep dive into high society betrayals. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with anyone who loves a brilliant plot twist. Stay fierce, and see you next time.